everyone. I'm Arlene Dickinson. Thanks for joining me on my podcast. I have been a longtime partner of TELUS because I value the support they provide to both local businesses and entrepreneurs. Recently, TELUS launched Stand With Owners. It's an initiative that's targeted to support Canadian small businesses during COVID-19 because now more than ever, we could all use a bit of help. And that's why TELUS and I have partnered to provide all of my listeners with an exclusive limited time offer. Right now, if you bring your business to TELUS, you can receive 20% off a mobility plan for business, and you also get the first 3 months free. That's right, free. Visit TELUS.com/reinvention to redeem this offer. Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Reinvention. Today I speak with Sabastian Diamond of a company called FaZe Clan. FaZe Clan is one of the globe's largest esports organizations, and this conversation is really fascinating. I learned a lot about the art of esports, the mental strength you have to participate in it, and I learned a lot about Sabastian, who is really a fascinating person. Take a listen. I'm super appreciative of the time, Sabastian, to talk to you. So, just doing a little bit of homework on you. I mean, I know you because we've been speaking over the course of the last year around what you do as it relates to esports. And for our listeners, like what they might find of super interest is that here I am, speaking to somebody who has probably nothing to do with my world whatsoever. But
right.
We have managed to find a great connection. And, you were a founder of one of the largest professional esports and entertainment organizations in the world. And, I was thinking like, that's just a really amazing thing. But one of the things we have in common, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but one of the things we have in common is that we both have been spending a lot of time on planes, because you were born and raised in Toronto, but you split your time between Toronto and LA. So what's it like to from flying all the time back and forth and having those homes in two different countries and places, and now being stuck in one place? Like, where are we talking to you from? Where are you right now?
So I'm at home in Toronto. I got back home about a month and a half ago when everything was about to break loose, right before the NBA shutdown. That was sort of the catalyst for a lot of major closures around the world. I got home a couple days before that had happened. I was planning on staying in LA much longer than I had at the time, but just kind of had the feeling, hey, maybe, let's get home. And I've been here since.
And are you missing the travel? Like, how does that feel like compared to, like, I know I do, like, I guess I'm not missing it, but I'm finding it really different to sit in one place all the time.
Yeah, I'm missing a lot of things. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm missing the travel in the sense that I'm kind of enjoying the extended time that this is offering to just settle down and take a pause, whether it was optional or mandatory in life. I wouldn't necessarily say I enjoy the aspect of traveling, but I certainly enjoy the aspect of being in other places. So that's certainly a miss. I definitely am missing out on a lot of the work we were doing while I was in Los Angeles previously. Because again, just with everyone working together, we were kind of firing on full cylinders. This is shaping up to be a big year for us. So we had a lot of exciting things we were working on, and I certainly miss being, boots on the ground with that. But as it relates to travel and being stuck at home, again, I'm thankful to be spending this quarantine isolation period in my actual home, which, not everybody has the liberty of. A lot of people are away from their homes or away from family. And I'm lucky to be in my apartment, in my own neighborhood, in a place I'm comfortable with. So I think I'm just taking that as the good news and trying not to worry about anything else I'm missing out on.
Yeah, that's exactly the right attitude. I mean, you can get yourself, you can start thinking about what's wrong instead of thinking about what's right. And I think you just outlined a bunch of stuff about what's right. Are you by yourself?
Yeah. I live alone in an apartment in Toronto.
Yeah, me too. So I'm alone. Like I'm a bit of an introvert. I don't know about you. Like are you a little bit of an introvert? I mean, you play esports, so I'm assuming is that a common denominator for gamers?
I would love to talk to somebody who knows more about the definition of an introvert versus an extrovert, because while I spend regardless of this isolation period, I spend the majority of my time at home, just sitting on my computer. But via that, I'm connected to, I mean, through our work and our job, I'm connected to millions of people. But even just through the nature of being a gamer, I mean, I'm spending time talking directly with, dozens of friends every single day, close friends who, will game together or just chat about different things, just via the nature of the way that gamers are connected. So I don't know. I really actually don't know how I could answer that question properly. I'd say a little bit of both.
Yeah, I people always are surprised when I say, "Hey, I'm an introvert," and they go, "No, you're not. You're like in the public eye all the time." I go,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
exactly.
but it's one thing to stand on stage and talk to thousands of people. It's another thing to be at a cocktail party and have to talk directly to, half a dozen people. I feel like I get a little bit overwhelmed by that sometimes. So it's
Absolutely.
You too, eh? So it's interesting. Well, maybe we're just unique humans. Now, I have a question for you. Question for you. You go by Seabass. So first of all, FaZe Clan is the name of the esport gaming company that you are a partner in. But you go by FaZe Seabass. Why Seabass? What does that mean?
So it's really just a shorthand nickname for Sabastian, which is my first name. I think a lot of people around the world named Sabastian. There aren't many. But whoever's out there with the same name can attest. Seabass is kind of just a name or a nickname that sticks. I couldn't tell you why, but it's the go-to for everybody. So it was a nickname people gave me when I was a young kid going to summer camp. That was where it first came from. And then when I got into, I've always been into gaming, but when I got into online gaming, it's the norm to create a different shorthand for you, right? A gamer tag that isn't just your name. It's not often you see people go online in multiplayer video games just using their actual name. They've usually got a different one. And a lot of people in my life were calling me Seabass at the time, so I just ran with that online, and it kind of stuck.
Well, I have to admit to you, when I saw it, because it's the letter C and then BASS, I thought it meant clan badass. That's what I thought it meant.
I'm open to any interpretation. I think that's a great one. That's a new one too. I've never got that before.
You've never got that? Like I just automatically thought badass. That's what it is.
Well, look, if that's the image I'm projecting, I'll take it. Love it.
So what would mine be? Like, okay, let's do that. If everyone has a nickname, like what would mine be?
I think that's up to you to come up with. I think it's something you got to go by, right? People are gonna call you that instead of your own name. So it's got to be something you like.
All right. Well, now you got me. Maybe we'll ask our listeners to come up with a good gaming name for me.
Oh, I think that's fun. Yeah, I think you get some great responses.
Yeah, considering my last name is Dickinson, I'm guessing I might not like some of the responses.
Maybe not, but there's always a few gems within the weeds. Maybe shoot that out on Twitter. I'm sure you get some good responses there too.
Probably. So now here's some, I was reading about you a little bit, and you in 2002, when you were only 8, so I'm now revealing your age, you attended an NBA game, and that was the last time Michael Jordan played in Toronto, right? Tell me.
Oh, I remember it vividly. So the context again was, at the time we were recording this, the ESPN has just started to release their Michael Jordan documentary, Last Dance, about their final championship season in '98 with the Bulls. And everyone on Twitter is kind of just sharing their moments and experiences they have with MJ. So that kind of caused me to vividly remember my own memory, because it was similar in the same fashion that everyone else at the time when I was 8 was talking about how great Michael Jordan is, right?
Right.
I'm always been a sports fan. So I was obviously familiar, but you tend to take the word of adults pretty seriously when it comes to that kind of stuff when you're really young. Like everyone's like, this guy's the best player ever. So I'm sitting there like, okay, awesome. Like I believe you, right? I'll take your word for it. So I got to go to what was like widely promoted as his final game. Like everyone knew it was his last year. He was like 42 at the time. But he was still performing well. I think he averaged like 20 points that season. And so I'm super excited. I'm like, great. Like this is I can tell this is going to be an important moment in my life to see this. And he scored 2 points. And he played, let's not get this twisted either. It's not like he got injured or like only subbed in the fourth quarter. He played 40 minutes that game.
Oh,
He scored
geez.
2 points,
Yeah.
and it's the lowest scoring game of his career. And I was the reason I remember this so vividly is because I was furious. I went to the box office like at it was the ACC at the time, like right out in gate 1.
Yeah.
I walked out and went up to them and said, "I want a refund." I was so mad. Of course, I didn't pay for the tickets, and like I don't even think I like knew what I was doing. But I just wanted to express the anger that like it had been talked up as I'm going to get to witness something so special, and that was not the case on that day. So
That's
an
hilarious.
unfortunate moment in my life in 2002.
I can just see you 8 years old going up to the box office and saying, "I demand."
Yeah, I'm sure they got a pretty good kick out of that. So at least I made someone's day, even though my day wasn't great.
But maybe that was the beginning of, was that, you said you were into sports, but was that kind of the beginning of your like spark for loving games in general, or like how did that?
No, I think I've always been a major sports fan. If anything, my love and passion for sports, the more I look back on it, the more I realize was a big catalyst towards taking gaming and video game competition as seriously as I did. Because for the first like 15 years of my life, I was a major sports fan. And I mean, I still am, not that that's changed. But a lot of the context around the way people, including myself, supported teams and the way communities rallied around teams and the passion that people had for their favorite players, their favorite sports, the way that, games and sports integrated themselves into communities, like that was all super familiar to me because I grew up watching all of them and involved and invested. So when it got to the point that competitive gaming was something that I was, being exposed to, it was really clear to me early on that like not only my passion for what's happening here, but everybody else who's in these gaming communities, like this is the same thing. And I was able to identify that pretty quickly, really, because like I said, I was so familiar with traditional sports and the fandom that surrounds those that there were so many parallels. And it was really obvious to me that the way that people supported these games, the way that people attempted to compete in these games, the communities that grew around people watching were so similar that really sports kind of helped me make the link to gaming.
That's interesting. I mean, and I know, like, so when you started the organization, which was, you founded it in 2010, right? You debuted on YouTube, and you only had 3 players in your clan. So, and they were playing Call of Duty.
Yeah. So I'll just jump into a very quick backstory. So how it started was 3 other guys. I wasn't one of them. I can't take credit for creating the original channel. There were 3 other guys, one Canadian, one from Florida, and one from Texas, I think, who were just friends. They'd met online playing Call of Duty, and they made a YouTube channel because they wanted to create videos together and promote them. And videos, when I say that, are just like, gaming highlight montages set to some music. And there was really no plan other than that. And the channel was made in 2010 on a May 30th, which is almost 10 years away. We're about a month away from our 10-year anniversary, which is a big moment for us. And about a month later, after the channel was made, I first saw one of their videos. They had about 600 subscribers at the time.
Yeah.
And I just came across one of their earlier videos on YouTube because I was just consuming everything Call of Duty at that time. I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool. And then just luck have it the next day or 2 days after, something to that effect, I'm playing Call of Duty. It was Modern Warfare 2 at the time, for anyone familiar. And I got into an online game with one of the people who was in that clan. Right, his name was FaZe Cat, and I sent him a message. I'm like, "Yo, man, I just saw your video the other day. I loved it. You guys are sick." And he responds like right away, like, "What the hell? You saw my video? Like, it had like less than 1,000 views." And he was like just so stoked that I'd seen it, that we struck a friendship that way. And from there on, like, I started playing with all those guys, and I just became eventually part of the team through the friendships that I built together online with these guys, just playing together because we shared the same passion. I was, consuming all the same content that they were trying to create. So I linked up with them that way. And then eventually about a year later started on taking a more serious role within the team where I was helping create a lot of the content that we did. And then I've kind of been doing that for 9 years since.
Well, that's the power of reaching out on social media, right?
Right.
Who would know that would lead to the future of your career and to where you are today? And good for him for applying to you. Like, even if he was surprised, because
that's my dude. Unfortunately, he's not around the space anymore. I actually haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's a great dude. He's from just outside Calgary, actually. I think they're from Banff or Red Deer, somewhere. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. I don't know my Alberta geography great. I think Red Deer.
Banff is towards the mountains and Red Deer is north of Calgary. So Banff is west.
Okay, he's north. So yeah, I think it's Red Deer then.
Oh, Red Deer. Okay.
But yeah, great
you
dude.
Should reconnect with him. Maybe he'll hear this and he'll reconnect.
Yeah, I definitely should. I wouldn't say we lost connection. Well, actually, no, I would say we lost connection just via that he's doing different things in his life. But really, really great dude. We were friends for a long time when he was back in the space doing things. He was a really, really strong creator. Again, this is House Cat. If anyone knows him, catches this audio, he made some of the best videos back in the day. Another one of our founders, one of the biggest figureheads really in the space for us of all time, is named FaZe Temper. And I know that one of House Cat's original videos was the first one that Temper saw. So he kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of us.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know, like, listen, I've been, because of the research I've been doing on the whole sector, I'm learning a lot. Like, I'm learning about the financial side of this business that you built. Mm-hmm. I mean, you guys raised a lot, like you raised, I think almost $23 million from a Canadian financial company from Canaccord in January, just recently. Like, tell me what it's like to raise money with traditional Bay Street or, type investors who aren't as familiar potentially with esports and e-gaming. Like, how do you go about, you're 26 years old, you're sitting in a room likely with a bunch of older people who've never done this before. What's that like?
I can tell you it's great now. It certainly wasn't, the whole way through. We've definitely had our ups and downs and bumpy moments getting to the point to be able to say that we're super comfortable and well-versed in raising capital. It took us a while to get there because, again, when we started, we were just kids. We were a group of teenagers. And to be clear, there was zero money in it when we started. Like, we had no intentions of creating money. There wasn't a way to monetize what we were doing. It was in nobody's brains that we were going to start making any money, let alone a living for ourselves or others. At the time, we just did it because we loved it and it was so fun, and that's what we wanted to do. We didn't even make any money until a couple of years into it. And then when we entered into esports, it was similar. So again, when we originally started the company, it was just content creation on YouTube, and then we entered into esports softly 2 years later, and then like firmly in about 2014. And again, when we did that, it actually cost us a lot of money. There was no way to make money doing it. We just did it because we were fans of the space. We wanted a team because we wanted to compete. And then eventually, a few years later, we figured out how to actually make the money from it. But when it comes to raising, to go back to your original question, I mean, we are so blessed to have a great team around us. I certainly can't take the credit for the majority of the work that goes into that, frankly, because there's people much more talented, much more well-versed in that world who've joined our team over the past couple of years. For the last 5 years, it's been our essentially major initiative to solidify ourselves as a business that knows how to drive revenue. Because 5 years ago, we had absolutely no clue how to do that. And, we've again hit our bumps along the way of trying to figure that out, trying to figure out who the right people are. But we know that we have them now, and they're absolutely great at their jobs. So I can't speak to too much about sitting in a room with those raising now. I can certainly tell you that when we started to do it, it was incredibly difficult because the space wasn't really respected in the way that it is now, and there were a lot of people trying to learn about what we were doing, but not necessarily understanding how to properly value it, because at the mass scale, the eyeballs that we can bring to certain things are just if you haven't seen other people talking about it or dealt with the space or truly like worked on a initiative like that, it doesn't really make sense that we're driving what we can just via our internet word of mouth. So it took us a long time to get there and prove that concept out. But now that we have a large team around us who all understand how to communicate that properly to people who don't know, it's gotten much easier.
So I said earlier when we were talking, and you probably cringed when I said it, I called it gaming, but I there is a big difference between esports and gaming, right? And don't people...
Yeah, no, I certainly wouldn't cringe when you say that. The only thing cringeworthy, and this is for anybody who's listening, is the word e-gaming. That one doesn't exist. That'll draw a big reaction. Okay. Anything else is fine. I mean, esports, to break it down quickly, esports just means competitive gaming. And then gaming is, the shape at large. Gaming is video games in general.
Okay, that's helpful to know. So tell me, so esports. This is, why don't you just define like esports in general? What all does it entail?
So esports is really any form of competition played through video games at the highest level. There will be some who say that esports only applies to games that have a solidified space, and that can mean a various amount of things. That can mean prize money, that can mean sponsorships, endorsements, that can mean organizations like ourselves being involved. To some, it can really just mean viability, which means whether or not the game even has a competitive aspect to it, right? Like there are a lot of games that people play, because again, gaming applies to anything. Gaming isn't just the hardcore stuff that you might see for the enthusiast. Gaming is like video games on your iPhone. Gaming is whatever. So there are certainly a lot of games out there that have no competitive nature. There's no objective way, for A to beat B in a skillful manner. So it doesn't apply to all games. But the ones that it does, and the ones that have a way for people who are competing in them to earn a living through their ability at that game, are what most people would refer to as esports.
Right. So I know that when we spoke last time, I was talking to you about my grandson who loves esports and is on Twitch and really loves to play. And
how's the stream going? Is he still active on it?
I think so. Yeah, I'm going to check in with him.
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too, because he really loves it. And you talked to me a little bit about what makes a great player, right? And and that and maybe just I think it would be interesting to just discuss that, because I think people just think, everybody who picks up, plays online or plays esports is going to be good at it if they just do it often enough. But isn't it very similar to like the physical sports world, where there are great stars at it, and they're better at it?
Yeah, you're being challenged at the highest level if you're competing in something that has a competitive ecosystem, which means that it's drawing a lot of people who want to play. And I mean, it's when you look at what professional athletes have to go through to be able to be at the top of their craft, a lot of the challenges are similar. Obviously not physically, in the sense that they're not applying their entire bodies in the way that obviously athletes do, and no one's going to overlook that. That's an incredible challenge. But there are a lot of similar obstacles, whether that be mentally or physically, a lot of them mentally. But again, a lot of the peak gamers in the world are much more physically gifted in ways that a lot of people don't understand when it comes to more specific things like hand-eye coordination, reaction time. But we've been involved in a lot of different tests that pair these traits with professional physical athletes, and a lot of the times the gamers win out on these because they've fine-tuned their ability in ways that a lot of normal people don't or can't. So it's certainly tough to attempt to really compete if you don't have a good hand-eye coordination or a good reaction time. Not to say it's impossible, but again, that's like trying to play in the NBA if you're only 5'10". It's not impossible, but it's going to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
And then as it comes to just general competition, I mean, they're dedicating their entire lives to their ability to earn a living through this, and that's similar with not only just professional sports, but almost any craft. And there are men, especially when you're so young, you're exposed to it so early. Not only exposed to it in a way like, oh, this is cool, I'm learning about this, I love this, but you're exposed to it in like, wow, I can make money right now. The pressure is a lot higher for a lot of these young kids. And that's kind of what's so different and unique is that their critical thinking is challenged in a lot of different ways. And that's what makes a lot of the stories for young gamers really interesting to follow, because they're having to deal with a lot of the issues that people usually only deal with at the highest level when they're later in life and have reached the peak of their careers. Well, a lot of these young kids, via the factor that it doesn't have to be physical and it's really just a critical thinking issue, a lot of these young kids can reach the highest levels pretty quickly, and then they're immediately exposed to the pressures of, whether or not they're going to be able to make money based on how dedicated they are to learning about their skills and, competing against others, because obviously it's incredibly highly competitive. So again, I could spend a lot of time talking about this, but the answer is yes. To wrap it back up to your question.
But it's interesting because I was just, as you were talking about, because I imagine the sweet spot is probably like mid to late teens, I'm guessing, is what you're talking about in terms of.
You'd be surprised. In sports, they kind of look at 40 as like the not the peak age, but like the max age. Like, and it's rare to see people playing not only at the high level, but even at the competitive level past 40 in professional sports. And gaming, that's more like 30.
Really?
It's very, very rare to see people playing at a high level past that age. There is differences in games, because again, some games are much more mechanically challenging than others, and some games rely a lot more really just on game sense and critical thinking and understanding than they do raw talent. And when I say like raw talent or mechanics, I'm referring to ability to execute different combinations or just aiming ability with a mouse or controller, whatever they're playing on. That's what's more referred to as raw skill. And then game sense and understanding is, of course, a mental thing. So you'll more often see older players excel at games that rely more on critical thinking. Examples of those would be tactical shooter games such as Counter-Strike or the newly released Valorant. And then games like Fortnite are unbelievably mechanically challenging. Like the amount of inputs like per second in that game required to compete at a high level is at the top. Very few other games in the world that are as mechanically challenging as that game is at the highest level. So a lot of the best kids who play are young, because their limbs are super flexible and they're not waking up with their hands tired. So it's a lot easier for them to just overpower other people via their raw ability at the game. So the age differences that kind of happen in it is interesting, but it's not vast like it is in other fields with like 20 to 40 or even 20 to 40. It's more like 12 to 25 in Fortnite.
So it's kind of out of the question for me.
It depends what game we're talking about. Fortnite.
I like the pause.
Fortnite, probably not. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll see you at the World Cup next year in Fortnite, no matter how hard you try. And I'm sorry to break it to you. But there are definitely other games out there that you would have a lot of fun with and would be able to, be competent in.
Like Mario Brothers.
Absolutely. Competing at the highest level, probably not.
Yeah, darn. Well,
I want to see you try.
Yeah, well, I when you were talking, I was thinking I'm an honorary captain in the Royal Canadian Navy, which there's something you may not know about me. And so I'm connected to the Canadian Armed Forces. And I remember talking to some of the pilots who fly our F-18s, and they were quite young, and they were talking very similar about, the eye-hand coordination and how you won't see a lot of, older pilots for this very reason. I mean, it's in this case, there's real lives at stake here. So it's very, it's the whole idea and the notion of being able to be in the game and actually compute the game, as well as all of the things that are going on in milliseconds. It must be crazy. And I was thinking about what you said about the pressure of being that age and having to compete and having to, absorb and think about all of the different levels of stimuli that are coming at you as you're playing. And it just struck me that, right now with the pandemic and what's going on, so you've got it sounds like a fairly not high, I guess it would be high stress in some cases, especially if you're competing, it is high stress. And you're now doing that in the midst of a pandemic and all of the challenges about potentially competing differently than you might have been competing. How does that layer in? Like are there mental health issues that relate to this, or is like, what's the story behind? Yeah.
It's certainly an area or a soft spot for me. because I think there are a lot of challenges that the people who are competing in this field face that certainly get overlooked. And I wouldn't necessarily say by outsiders. I don't mean it in that like pity respect. I'm more so even just mean within the space. Again, for a lot of the reasons that I just went through, there are a lot of young kids who are at the highest level in this industry, which is unlike most others, and that they reach the ability to competently earn a living much younger than most fields do. And because of that, the pressures that these kids face, they aren't different than other people. Everybody in the world faces those pressures, but a lot of these guys reach it a little bit sooner via their ability to compete or even just create content, etc. And again, this isn't specific to esports. This isn't specific to gaming. I'm more speaking on just internet culture at large, but certainly through my experience as it relates to gaming and esports. But they just reach that ability where it becomes available to them a lot younger than most people. So not a lot of people are equipped to deal with the pressures of something like that when they're that young. And they, especially because it's so new and because it didn't really exist a generation ago. Like, as I mentioned, when our business, when we started, didn't exist, there was no parallel. There was like, we couldn't look at something else and be like, let's try this because it worked for them. Or here's an example of why this is going to work. We should keep doing it. Then we created the industry really over the last 10 years, not us and our brand specifically, but the industry itself has been created over the last like 10 to 15 years. So for a lot of these kids, they don't have parents that can relate to what they're going through. I think we're going to see that change in the next generation. But right now we're at the unique point where that's not the case. And it can be pretty hard for a lot of these kids to have the ability to make life-changing amounts of money or not make life-changing amounts of money based on their own dedication at 14 years old, doing something that they just liked doing. And all of a sudden they're put in a position like to decide how seriously they need to take it. And so there are a lot of challenges that come with that. Again, I'm not a psychologist. I can't speak to all of them. But it's certainly something I'm aware of. It's certainly something I try to bring attention to. And that's why it's our biggest initiative and really spot of importance for us as a company to make sure that we're doing whatever it is that we can to work hand in hand with not only all of our people, but especially our young people, just to make sure that they have the support around them that's needed. I won't say I have the answer, because again, these are all new challenges. So there's really no book on how to deal with this yet. But we're kind of taking it a day as it comes and just making sure that it's something that we pay attention to, that we put the right support around them, that we put the right team around them, and that we try not to do anything that would unfairly put weight or pressure on someone who doesn't need it yet at that point in their life. So even though we can bring so much exposure, when I say exposure, I just mean like, via social growth, internet exposure at large, we bring so much exposure to the people that we bring in. It's a very important project for us now to make sure that anyone who comes in is done the right way, that we're speaking with their parents ahead of time, which, a couple of years ago wouldn't have been how we did it, just because, we weren't, again, it was all new. So now whenever anybody underage comes into our company as a new talent or a new pro or whatever, there's an extensive period of time where we're speaking with their parents, we're putting the right systems in place, we're putting proper processes in place to make sure that they're comfortable, they have everything they need, their families are good, their families are completely in the loop with what's going on, what's being expected of their child, and they're fully a part of that process now. And I think that's something that's really helped us. So again, I can't say enough. Anytime I'm talking about something great we do, the majority of the credit with that goes to our team. I mean, at FaZe Clan, we're like, God, I don't even know. We're large. We're a big, I think over 50 people in our staff now. And so many of them are so great at what they do. So, props to them for making sure that we're doing this the right way.
Yeah. Like as a in my generation, I'm trying to think of the right way to say as an older woman, but as an older human, how's that? As an older person. Right. I used to think when I would see my kids play esports, when I would see them, online playing, when I see my grandson playing, I did have a bias about it. I did think to myself, well, they should be out playing. They should be out interacting with people. They're becoming shut-ins. So I did have a lot of kind of negativity around this notion of, these kids sitting in front of a computer screen. And I think certainly things have evolved a lot. And I think you can have these sorts of issues at the best of times in a pandemic when we're all at home and you see your kid in front of a computer all the time. You're thinking, oh, is that the best thing for them? But perhaps it is in some ways a good way for them to escape some of the reality of what is happening in the world and still be able to do something productive. Because one of the things you said that struck me when we've spoken in the past is kind of how much money some of these young kids can actually make. I mean, they are like you said, elite athletes in their own sense from, maybe in the esports world versus a traditional sports world, but they are making like, what kind of dollars are we talking about? Like people would probably be interested to know.
Yeah. We have multiple teenagers who are now the highest earning, providers in their household. We have kids who are 15, 16 who've bought homes for their families because again, they're the best at what they do, and they're properly paid for that because that sentence is true, right? It's not about they're young and they're making too much money. It's like no, they're the best in the world at what they do, so they make a great living, and we're really so proud whenever we get to see kind of how they're choosing to support their families through that. I think it's a common trend through a lot of young gamers who kind of have this money to immediately give it back because they understand a lot of them have great support systems within their families to allow them to do what they're doing. Like, as you said, it's not necessarily a natural reaction to feel that way and to support somebody immediately through a career in that. It's certainly getting more natural now, but it definitely wasn't when we started. And there's nothing to feel bad about that either. I mean, anyone out there who has had a similar reaction or feels that way towards, just gaming or computers or phones or, any type of technology in general and the amount of time their kids might spend on it, it's certainly natural. There's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling that way. But what I would say is really what matters more to me is how the person choosing to spend their time that way is responding to it, right? Because where I would see a problem is before the kid goes out and spends all this time gaming and does this, like preventing them because you don't want them to explore it. That I would say is more of an issue, but I'm parent however you want to. I'm just speaking my own opinion. But where it certainly could become a problem is when someone spends a lot of time online and they become worse for it, right? I'm not here to say that the internet is nothing but a great place and that spending all your time gaming is nothing but a good thing. There are certainly negatives to all pursuits, including this one. And there are definitely people who may spend too much time or may neglect too many other things or just may expose themselves, by choice or by just happening to things that put them in a worse state of mind. And if that's the case, absolutely, then they shouldn't be doing it. I think it's really just important how they feel about it. I'm a firm believer in anything in life that as long as you're happy, that you, and doing what you want to do, or not want to do in the sense of like something stupid or whatever, but like doing what you makes you feel better, that it's a great thing. I mean, from my own experience, again, like I had a similar family who just didn't necessarily want me to game as much as I was doing it, but I met a lot of my best friends through that, just through the nature of how easy it is to communicate with new people in gaming. And you get exposed to different people around the world. You certainly change your viewpoints on things. It's a much more accelerated way of growing up. And it was definitely helping me. I was becoming just more open, more, I guess, extroverted, but that's not really like the proper word to describe this. But I mean, I was definitely it was easier for me to communicate with other people via the amount of time I spent communicating with people online, and it helped. I can confidently say that just through my own personal experiences over the last 10 plus years, that I've made some people I count as my closest friends and grown greatly as a person through those friendships, just via gaming, via spending experiencing things I would have never otherwise through having more people to experience them with. So well, I think it definitely can be a great thing.
I mean, I like that a lot because I think people listening to this would be surprised again, at your age, 26,
Mhm.
you're very articulate, you're a great communicator. I think those are things that
Thank
it
you.
sounds like you've learned as a result of the experience that you've had, right? So you clearly have learned how to express yourself. One of the things, so speaking of expressing yourself, one of the things in December 2019, FaZe
Mhm.
Clan tweeted goal for 2020 question mark. And your
Yeah.
response to that was really interesting. Your response to that was be more vulnerable.
Oh,
Now,
personally. Yeah.
so to tell me, like that was in December, that was before all this happened.
Mhm.
Um, before we got into the pandemic. What do you mean? Like be more vulnerable? How are you now more vulnerable, or are you more vulnerable than you were in December?
That's a broad topic. I'm still working on it. I think I'm getting there. I'm just at a point in my life where I think it's important for me to be sharing more about how I feel about things with the people around me, with the people in my life, with being more willing to allow new people into my life and all the vulnerability that comes from that. I certainly think that's a lifelong pursuit. I don't think I'm going to be able to flip a switch and get there, but it's certainly a point that I'm making to be more willing to do it than I was in the past. I've certainly dealt with my own issues just from not willing to be vulnerable because I didn't share how I truly felt about something, or I didn't suggest something that I thought was right because I was afraid of the judgment that might come from putting my opinion out there. It's a lot easier to internalize things sometimes, but I don't think that was helping make me a better person or helping the people around me. I don't think it's the best, of course, to always do that. It's important to find the right filter for sure. But I think the difference between where I was in my life or where I have been in my life versus where I want to be is a little more spread apart than I thought was helping my state of mind. So I'm just trying to do more things, including spending the last 2 minutes talking about this in a public forum, to bridge that gap. So I'm getting there, I think. I don't think I'm there yet, though.
It's hard. I mean, vulnerability is one of those, like people talk about great leadership coming from being genuine and being willing to be vulnerable in public and in front of your teams. And it's a hard thing to do but I have learned, over the years that the more vulnerable I am, the more willing I am to share, what I'm really going through when I'm afraid or when I'm, unsure or feeling, in some way insecure about something. The more I
Mhm.
do that, the better response I actually get from people. And it's a really weird lesson to learn because,
Yeah.
as you just said, you feel like you're supposed to be the person either in charge, has to always have all the answers, and that you're the one people are looking to, and you don't want to admit that you don't know everything and you don't have all the answers. But I think it's brave to do the things you're doing and to talk about it. I know that you bought a guitar while you've been in isolation, right?
Hmm.
How's that?
Yeah,
Is that
that's unbelievably challenging. Even to your point that you just said, I think that's so true, and something that a lot of people who don't exist in a public forum don't necessarily understand is it's a pretty common conception to think that anyone who lives a life similar to mine or the people in my industry or even yourself or really anyone who exists as a public entity, it's really common to assume that by that nature that those people are incredibly open. Like, oh, you have so and so followers, you're on Twitter, like what do you mean you're so open, you like allow people to know who you are? And there's just a lot of preconceptions that come with assuming people in that position are willing to be open because it's just, it comes off as if they already are. In reality, it's the opposite, because I think when you exist in a public forum and it's working out well for you, when you have people who follow you, when you have people who listen to the things you say, when you have people who have this perception of you that isn't you, right? Like you don't personally know these people, you don't have a relationship with them in the same way like the people close to you in your life do. You've never met them. So they have a public perception of you as your online persona. And when it's working out for you, it becomes incredibly hard, at least for me. I don't know if everyone else in the experience shares the same thing, but certainly for me, it becomes difficult at some points to want to share more, to have new thoughts, to express new opinions, to think something might be controversial, because you think people have this vision of you, this perception of you, and you don't want to fuck it up, right?
Yeah.
You don't want them to think that you're not who they thought you were, because you don't know them, and you know that they don't know who you are, right? But you know that the version of them is good, so you kind of want to preserve that, right? And I think that speaks a lot to the vulnerability thing I was talking about, which is when you have that online persona, really sharing anything is being vulnerable, because you in some ways can perceive it as, this might ruin the perception of me that people think that I am. And that's the challenges that come with that are very, very broad.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I couldn't.
No, of course.
But I couldn't agree more with that, because we spend our lives curating, like you say, like reinforcing and curating a persona. And I'm sure in esports it's even more so, because you don't ever physically meet many of the players that you play with, and so you have this carefully cultivated persona, and people come to know you as a certain thing. And yet in life we change, right? We evolve. We come up with different opinions. We have different views. We change our perspectives, and then we find it hard to somehow reinvent ourselves at any point in our life, because that's not what people expect from us. And we've done such a good job of making them think and believe what we are, not because we were being false, but because we were, at the time, that was very genuine to who we are. But people change, and it's very hard to change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely makes you feel differently about expressing new opinions and new thoughts, and you're really just exposing who you are now, because you feel like someone else might think you're different. Like even in my job, I think we're just kind of looping back to that point of being vulnerable. Even in my job, like I mentioned earlier, we brought a ton of new people in over the last couple of years to help us really solidify and structure ourselves as a business versus just a passion. And a lot of those people who work with us now came in and kind of just heard through word of mouth, who I am or what I've done for the company, or like my position. And it can create a vision that's like, oh, this guy's like Sebas, he knows everything about this. Like, this is the guy, this is the man, like, props to him. There was a point in my life not too recently, well, I say not too recently, like, a year ago, a couple years ago, that was really hard for me, because we had so many new people that had come in who had heard what I was doing or had heard what I'd done, but I'd never met, knew nothing about me. And I was feeling this like extreme pressure to uphold that vision of who they thought that I was. And it became incredibly counterproductive, because I reached a point where I wasn't outputting anything, or even talking to these people, or like existing in conversations, because I knew who they thought I was, and I knew they thought I was talented at something, and I didn't want to fuck it up. And that was a really challenging point for me, because again, that's like an incredibly counterproductive reality to live in. And it's still something I think I'm doing a much better job now, but it's still something I'm navigating, which is, how do I properly exist within our business the way that I need to, without having a perception of something that's stupid holding me back from working in the way that I know that I can, and I know that I should. So again, there's just so much that goes into it, right? So I do think I'm getting better, though. I feel much better now about a lot of those issues than I used to. And so much of that, like we keep discussing, came from just being willing to be vulnerable. It's always harder at the time, but I always felt better after. I always felt better for it. And the older I get, the more I'm learning to trust that feeling.
Yeah, well, I'd say that the fact that you can say that even at the age that you are is actually pretty astounding, because that is something that I only learned later in my life. I only learned it much later in my life, where I went.
I'm only 25. I'm not 26 yet.
Oh, gee. Oh, you're only 25. When's your birthday?
May 8th, so we're not too far away.
Oh, so very close. Well, you're close to 26, but yeah,
yeah,
right.
We'll count it.
25. Well, listen, this has been really helpful and really informative. I've learned a lot about kind of the challenges and the interest level of what's going on in esports. But I want to ask you a different question just here at the end. You're a pretty big friend, you're a pretty big fan, of Kawhi Leonard, right?
How can you not be?
So what did you think when he left the Raptors?
It was hard, but I respected it. I mean, I could spend an hour talking about that, but I think it kind of all breaks down to that sense, that reality. It was unfortunate. I think we could have run it back as champions again this year, but I mean, look at the world now. There may be no champion this year. So I said earlier on the call that I'm a firm believer that anything that makes somebody happy is what they should do, and that's kind of what my opinion is on Kawhi, is that he wanted to go home. And I saw one specific interview where he said the biggest reason for it was he kept going back to LA because that's his home, and seeing different family members. And every time he went back, they looked different. They were growing up like young, like nieces and nephews. And he said that he hated that he wasn't around more often because every time he saw them, they changed, and he wanted to be part of that change because they're his family and he wanted to be in their lives more. And like that was specifically why he wanted to go home, so that he could spend half the year around his family as opposed to just like once a year. And to me, that's like, after I read that, I was like, okay, I'm good. Like this is what he wants for himself in his life. And, as disappointed as I am that the Raptors couldn't be 2-time, 3-time champions, like what is it worth if he's not happy? Like why is my happiness more important than his? So, it is what it is.
You didn't go to the box office to complain?
No, I didn't ask for a refund that time. I was much more willing to be pissed off about those things when I was 8.
Exactly. Just any final thoughts for people on, your players that are out there that are listening to this, and the potential other players that are out there that even aren't part of FaZe Clan, but just in general on the pandemic and how to help navigate, right now, and what your recommendations are that they can do to just help keep themselves grounded?
Absolutely. I think it's important to try new things. Anything that, when I say new things, I don't mean force yourself into doing something that you might not like just because I want to try something new. Let's, whatever. When I say new things, I more mean something that's been on your mind that you just haven't got to. Like for me right now, it's guitar, and it's unbelievably challenging. And I wouldn't say I'm enjoying it because I'm still at the point where I'm awful and don't know how to do it. But it's just, it's challenging my mind in a different way, and I'm thankful for that challenge. I'm taking a lot more walks than I ever have. I'm spending more time meditating. I'm spending more time without my phone than I usually do, just to kind of clear my head and think. I'm just trying to live in a way that I feel like might be better. And that's really all there is to it. I don't think it's important, though, to force yourself to do something differently, again, if it's not something that you want to do. I mean, all the changes that I think I've made over the past month and a half, or at least changes that I'm trying, are things I'm doing because I want to. And then what specifically has changed is that I'm more willing to do it, right? But there's nothing that I'm pressuring myself to do. And I think actually that's the most important message, if I can send to anybody, is don't feel pressured to live differently in a way that you don't want to, or to feel like you need to be outputting more or working harder on something, because those are not thoughts that anybody needs right now. I think it's just important that when the pandemic has come to an end, that everybody not necessarily feels good about the way they spent their time, because this is a really hard time for a lot of people, and that's, it's impossible to say that everyone can feel that way. I mean, myself included, but I think it's important that you're doing whatever you can to position yourself that when the pandemic does end, that you're in a good place to resume your life, whatever that means to you. That's it for me.
Yeah, that's sound advice for anybody right now, and really appreciate it. I always learn a lot when I talk to you, Sabastian. I really enjoy our conversations. And
thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm always willing to talk whenever you got my number.
Yeah, I do. And for those of you who want it, no, you can't have it. So, all right.
You can reach me on Twitter, though, if anyone's got any questions. It's FaZe Seabass, CBASS. I'll try to get back to anyone who reaches out.
That's very kind of you, and thanks. I love following you on Twitter. I love following you on social. So be
Likewise.
well.
Yeah, you've got much better tweets than me. You got to give yourself credit. Your tweets are good.
Oh, thanks. All right. Well, we'll stay in touch, and we look forward to talking to you soon, Sebastian.
All right. You as well. Take care. Thanks for having me.
That was a conversation that taught me so much. I went into talking to Sabastian with some preconceived ideas about what esports is all about, and I have learned that I was wrong. You know what? There is skill, dexterity, practice, focus. There's so much to being competitive in this sport, and he really did help me understand it more effectively. I also love Sebastian's view on life. I love his commitment to the mental health of his players, to the commitment of mental health in general. I love how he has taken the time through COVID to use it to practice and learn new things, new musical instruments, new ideas. And I love how focused he is on the future, how he's thinking about what's next, how he's thinking about that little boy that he was when he was 9 years old and he asked for a refund because he didn't get quite what he wanted at a basketball game, and how he has reinvented himself into a global player in the esports business. Good luck to all the players out there, and thanks, Sabastian, for opening my eyes. This podcast is made possible by the great folks at Venture Communications. Thanks to our engineers, writers, producers, and all the folks who work really hard to bring you these great stories of reinventions each and every week.